One of the things that's so confusing to me is that they didn't even like Pac. So for them to do, a documentary or everything on Pac, that's strictly business.
Yeah, he was scared. Yes, I agree. I do agree that he was probably terrified for his life. So if that is the case, it's also quite feasible that he put up money to get Pac killed.
We open where the story fractures open again, with the most explosive allegation yet, and we do not slow down. In late 2025, with Dwayne Keefe D. Davis finally in custody and facing a first-degree fatal charge for the 1996 shooting of Shakur, insiders say he flipped and began cooperating with the FBI, revealing details that could upend how we understand one of the most notorious tragedies in music history. This is not idle rumor. This is the same Keefe D. who gave prosecutors and federal agents his own words from a 2008 LA police interview and his 2019 memoir, Compton Street Legend. And now sources familiar with the case allege he has gone further, naming new figures in the chain of command behind the fatal 1996 ambush. The name that has everyone talking in industry corridors and justice circles is Snoop Dogg, long seen as an icon of West Coast culture, now whispered to be entangled more deeply than the public ever knew. That revelation alone would have sent shockwaves through every hip-hop fan community in the world, but the context, the decades of unresolved questions, the official silence, the half-remembered interviews and public boasts, makes this feel like something long buried finally gnawing its way into daylight. We can feel the urgency and how fast the messaging around this is spreading, how quickly every faction is mobilizing to respond.
The reason we asked everyone to be here today is obviously we are the new attorneys for Dwayne Davis in the Tupac case, now set for trial February of next year. The reason in particular that we asked the media to be here is that, obviously we're not trying the case in the media, but we want to establish better relations with the media.
We can trace back where Keefe D's own admissions first cracked open a cold case that sat dormant for nearly 3 decades. He was publicly known to police as a suspect almost from the moment Shakur was shot on September 7, 1996 in Las Vegas. Yet no charges came until September 29, 2023, when Las Vegas authorities finally charged him after re-examining statements he made publicly and in media. Lieutenant Jason Johansson explained that it was Davis's own voluntary comments and interviews and his memoir that led to the case being reinvigorated. In Death Row Chronicles on BET in 2018, he said, in his words, that he was in the Cadillac that pulled up beside Shakur and Shug Knight's BMW before shots rang out. He didn't claim to have pulled the trigger that he placed on his nephew Orlando, Baby Lane Anderson, but he clearly placed himself at the nerve center of the plot. That narrative alone reframed an incident that for years felt like a phantom, unseen and unresolved. But now, as we watch filings from prosecutors overseen by the Clark County District Attorney's Office tease new allegations, every line of those old confessions feels like a thread pulling us into a far more complex web.
It's the idea here is that the state has the burden of proving it beyond a reasonable doubt. We don't think that they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Also, just to go back a second about what was seized, also what was mentioned was some memorabilia, posters of Tupac and things like that, which we don't really think has a lot of evidentiary value, but,
The boldest thread, the one now at the center of speculation and quiet outrage, is that Keefe D., once the shot caller of a Southside Crips faction and long a figure on the periphery of this story, may have provided information to the FBI linking Snoop Dogg to the orchestration of Shakur's fatal shooting. Snoop has long enjoyed a carefully curated public image, a legacy built on chart dominance and cultural influence. Yet sources say that in closed conversations with federal agents, Keefe D discussed meetings and motivations that place Snoop not on the sidelines, but as a possible customer of the hit, allegedly part of the plan to handle Shakur and Shug Knight. Industry insiders were stunned by the suggestion when word first trickled out. If true, this is not only a monumental scandal for a globally recognized artist, but a seismic shift in how we contextualize the East Coast-West Coast era rivalry, once framed largely around Diddy, Biggie, Shakur, and Death Row versus Bad Boy Records. Now, Snoop's name bristles at the center of renewed legal scrutiny. We have to restate what is verifiable while acknowledging how quickly this feeds suspicion.
There was a great deal of documents that were taken. In Mr. Wilson's initial press conference, he had stated that our client is presumed innocent. And that's obviously a constitutional protection that every defendant enjoys. However, he had said that just recently they had come upon evidence that they felt basically corroborated their theory of the case, and he had made reference to this.
In 2008, Keefe D spoke to Los Angeles police under an immunity offer in a PCP ring case, and his statements were later published in the book about the case by former Detective Greg Kading and detailed in LA Weekly's coverage. In those conversations, he admitted supplying the Glock 40 that was used in the shooting and said that if the cars had been reversed, he would have fired the shot himself. Those admissions, once treated as confessions with limited legal consequence, have become, with modern filings and his arrest, the backbone of a living case narrative. His repeated outline of a meeting at Greenblatt's Deli, where he claimed he discussed a bounty with Sean Diddy Combs, was long dismissed by Combs' representatives as fiction and completely ridiculous. Yet that version of events resurfaced with force in prosecutors' filings and, now, has allegedly expanded in what federal sources say he is telling agents about other names and motivations. Within the industry and legal community, this has created a new type of tension. Snoop, according to multiple people we've spoken to behind the scenes, has been closely monitoring how these filings are interpreted.
When you get to be the age that we are and you get to become as successful as we are, you have to start doing some things that matter for the future.
His representatives publicly deny any involvement in orchestrating the 1996 shooting, and Las Vegas police have reiterated that Snoop has never been formally considered a suspect in the homicide investigation. But the fact that these allegations are entering federal conversations at all changes the stakes. Snoop is currently navigating his own legal challenges on unrelated federal charges, including convictions on 2 counts of transportation to engage in improper conduct and awaiting sentencing. Industry observers note how damaging it would be if someone in custody, especially a longtime figure like Keefe D, begins naming high-profile figures in connection with the Shakur shooting, which has haunted hip-hop and justice narratives for nearly 30 years.
Humans are not just good and bad, black and white. They're compassionate at times. They're at times. A man can be and compassionate to women at the same time. I was. Look at the lunatic and look at Brenda's got a baby.
We can see how this revelation reframes long-standing rivalries and unresolved mysteries. For decades, the official story, or lack thereof, left families, fans, and cultural commentators with fragments. The ambush at a Vegas intersection just blocks off the strip after a boxing match, the .40 caliber Glock fired in multiple rounds, Shakur's critical injuries, and Shug Knight's close escape. Over the years, alternative theories circulated. Some focused on gang retaliation, others on record label wars, personal vendettas, or misguided loyalties. Now, if federal investigators are examining whisper lines that touch Snoop Dogg's name in connection with financial motivation or indirect encouragement, what was once considered fringe is suddenly thrust into the heart of the official labyrinth. Sources close to prosecutors insist they are cautious, saying that all allegations must be vetted and that mere mention in interviews does not equal evidence of culpability. Yet, in the court of public perception, every hint, every insider account slides into narrative urgency. Meanwhile, former Death Row Records CEO Shug Knight, who was present that night and survived with a graze wound, continues to add fuel to the fire.
We play by the rules. You got a lot of people playing both sides of the fence. But at the same time, if your name's Shug Knight, the authority's never gonna treat you fair. My whole case in this case wasn't treated fair.
From his prison cell, he has repeatedly claimed that others were involved, and in recent conversations with media outlets, he even suggested that people close to the case are trying to quietly secure Keefe D's release because they fear what he might reveal. Whether that extends to whispers about Snoop's purported motivation remains unverified, but it illustrates how many layers of suspicion have accumulated around this story. In discussing how these insider narratives are circulating, we watch how they pull apart old assumptions and build new ones. The very idea that someone once loyal to the street code might now be talking to federal agents is reshaping how we think about complicity, loyalty, and self-preservation. As we dig into the timelines and compare what was once public with what is now emerging behind closed doors, the question becomes not just who knew what, but what will happen if these statements made to investigators become part of formal evidence.
There's going to be a number of motions filed. There'll be a motion to suppress, filed promptly, that concerns the search warrant that was executed on his residence. That search warrant contained a nighttime clause, which is curious. You've got a case that's nearly 30 years old, yet you have this 24-hour nighttime search, this 24-hour authorization. So that's the first of several motions that we anticipate filing. I mean, anytime you have a cold case.
Sources familiar with the ongoing review tell us that prosecutors are methodically assessing every line Keefe D has ever uttered, from his 2008 confession to the LA police, through his televised recounting on Death Row Chronicles, to his vivid narrative in Compton Street Legend. Each iteration adds texture: the meeting at Greenblatt's, the strategy for that night in Vegas, the gun passed into the back seat, the chaotic moment at the stoplight, and now, allegedly, the suggestion that there were backers with broader interests than previously documented. The ripple effect is already evident. Legal strategists on multiple sides have begun tightening defenses, publicists are drafting statements, and fans around the world are reassessing their understanding of a tragedy that once seemed immutable. And just when we start to latch onto one thread of interpretation, another question shoots up behind it, refusing to leave the silence unchallenged. The story is now unfolding not only as a historical revisit, but as a live inquiry into who pulled which strings and why, and if the implications of Keefe D's cooperation go far beyond what anyone anticipated. We watch as every reluctant admission, every passage from an old interview and every rumor now gains fresh gravity under intense scrutiny, because if one allegation against Snoop Dogg carries weight, then the entire web of loyalties and rivalries from that era must be reevaluated in real time. And with federal interest reportedly lingering, the next phase of this saga threatens to reveal even more about motives, alliances, and unanswered questions that have held music culture in suspense for nearly a generation. And that's exactly where things start to spiral.
You know, we're not taking this case trying to win it on a technicality. We're obviously still getting up to speed on the case, but we anticipate it going to
Because once whispers about Keefe D's supposed cooperation hit the prison system, they didn't stay contained for long. We started hearing that other inmates were talking, saying the old death row empire wasn't just being haunted by the past, it was cracking open from the inside. Shug Knight, still behind bars and still speaking like he owns the last word on West Coast truth, began dropping fresh accusations that felt almost designed to blow up what was left of hip-hop's sacred mythology. According to him, Snoop Dogg, the man who'd publicly distanced himself from death row's darker years, had allegedly been trying to bail Keefe D out of custody. We can't ignore how strange that sounds. Why would one of music's most powerful icons risk being linked to a man now confessing to one of the industry's most infamous tragedies? Insiders close to Knight say the claim came during a prison interview where he suggested Snoop had people contacting intermediaries, quietly asking questions about how much Keefe D was really telling investigators. That accusation alone turned years of grudges into potential motive.
Yeah, I'm waiting, along with a lot of other of Pac's loved ones and fans and supporters. This is like the first, one of the first bits of the answer to what happened to Pac.
We remember that Knight and Snoop's relationship had never truly recovered from the mid-90s fracture. The arguments over loyalty, over Shakur, over business. It's no secret that Snoop left death row on tense terms after Shakur's tragedy and built his own empire far away from the red and black banner Knight once ruled with fear. But now, decades later, with Snoop having purchased the death row brand back in 2022, Knight's comments sting with something more than nostalgia. He has said publicly that Snoop is mad because he owns the label now, and those words carry weight when mixed with his darker claims. It's as if the man who once made the rules is now trying to expose everyone who broke them. The chain reaction didn't stop there. Former associates of Knight, people who worked the death row circuits in the 90s, began calling journalists saying they'd heard versions of this story before. One former road manager, speaking anonymously, claimed Knight had been warning about someone close to the Dogfather trying to interfere with the Vegas case months before it was public. Another insider alleged that Snoop's camp had quietly reached out to Keefe D's relatives through mutual acquaintances, possibly to gauge how serious his cooperation with federal authorities had become. None of this has been confirmed, but we can see how the pattern feeds the storm. Every old rivalry reborn, every silence suddenly suspicious.
I just get right on the side of his head and just start talking to him in his ear. Just talking to him.
Behind all the noise is one undeniable fact. Shug Knight's new statements have reignited an old theory that the world had long buried, that Snoop Dogg's friendly image hides a darker history with Shakur than fans ever suspected. Knight has always insisted that Shakur and Snoop were not on good terms in those final days. He's even said Shakur once tried to fight Snoop after hearing him speak kindly about Biggie and Diddy on a radio show, just weeks before that fatal night in Vegas. Shakur felt betrayed, Knight claimed during an earlier interview. He was angry that someone he loved as a brother went soft on the enemy. The fight, according to him, nearly happened in a New York hotel room before security stepped in. And if that rift was real, it changes everything about what we thought those last hours meant. The studio sessions, the silence, the uneasy smiles caught in photographs. We have to remember what came after.
I say a week before we was best of friends. 2 days before he died, I don't think he liked me.
Within months, Shakur was gone. Snoop left death row and the empire Shug built started to crumble under indictments and fear. Fast forward to now, with Keefe D behind bars talking to agents and Snoop controlling the label he once fled, and it feels almost circular, as if the ghosts have returned to demand answers. When Shug accuses Snoop of wanting to free Keefe D, it's not just a headline, it's a threat wrapped in subtext. Because if Keefe D really is telling investigators names tied to money or orders, and one of those names traces back to anyone still powerful, that revelation could set off the kind of industry earthquake we haven't seen since the original East Coast-West Coast collapse. We've seen how these cases evolve.
So him being neutral in the beginning was amazing. And then him choosing sides at the end was a demise.
First comes denial, then the selective memory, and finally the quiet repositioning as reputations start to shake. Sources within Las Vegas law enforcement reportedly confirmed that they're still analyzing hours of recorded interviews from Keefe D, some containing statements that were never made public. Whether Snoop's name appears in any of them remains unknown, but the timing of Knight's latest outburst, right after prosecutors delayed Keefe D's trial until early 2026, feels deliberate. The longer the delay, the more time there is for someone to rewrite the narrative, to settle scores, or to plant rumors so deep that truth and fiction become interchangeable. And then there's the money. The original bounty that Keefe D described back in the day, the supposed $1 million offered for the hit, was once linked to Sean Diddy Combs. But Knight's recent interviews twist that story again. hinting that others on the West Coast might have been involved in funding or facilitating retaliation. Could it be that the Diddy angle was only half the picture? Some veteran producers from the era have quietly told reporters they believe more than one player put money on the table. It wasn't just an East Coast beef, one said recently. It was internal. It was business. If even a fraction of that is true, then Snoop's acquisition of Death Row in 2022 looks less like nostalgia and more like a calculated reclamation, a way to control the narrative before someone else controls him. Meanwhile, fans are split.
I have never seen, until Kendrick now, I'd never seen anybody from where I'm from, the area I'm from, the place I'm from, do what Snoop did.
Some call Knight's comments the desperate ramblings of a man with nothing left to lose. Others say he's dropping hints that will prove explosive once court transcripts surface. Snoop, for his part, continues to move as if untouchable, releasing music, appearing on television, and maintaining a calm exterior even as the headlines get darker. His only public response so far was a brief online jab. "This man won't stop talking about me," followed by, "Mad 'cause I own Death Row. I realize your lies." It was classic Snoop, flippant, dismissive, and perfectly timed to deflect without explaining. Yet behind that confidence lies a growing curiosity. Why even respond if the claims are nonsense? Why not ignore them entirely? That question keeps circling back as we dig through this tangled mess of loyalties and confessions. Every time we think the story's gone cold, someone inside the system leaks a new detail. A name scribbled in a transcript, a note about unsealed evidence, a rumor about new witness cooperation. There's talk that if Keefe D continues naming names, prosecutors might extend their net further than anyone expects. And the thought of federal agents dragging decades-old rivalries into modern courtrooms has everyone in the industry holding their breath. At this point, it's no longer just about who fired the weapon in that white Cadillac. It's about who ordered the move, who profited from the chaos, and who's been hiding behind loyalty slogans for nearly 30 years. When we look at how fast alliances are shifting, from Diddy facing his own legal troubles to Shug hinting at revenge through information, we can't shake the feeling that another major revelation is waiting just around the corner. We might be standing on the edge of the final unmasking of hip-hop's darkest secret, and this time, no one will be able to laugh it off as old street gossip.
It's so complicated, convoluted, chaotic. It's hard to actually figure out what's what, but it's becoming clearer.
So the question becomes unavoidable. If Keefe D keeps talking, who's next to fall? Could Snoop's empire, the same one built on redemption and nostalgia, be the next casualty of a truth finally catching up? Or will the legend survive yet another scandal untouched? Whatever happens, one thing's certain. This story isn't finished, and the next headline might be the one that changes everything we thought we knew about that night in Vegas. What do we think? Have we been watching the real story unfold all along? Or are we just witnessing another round of revenge through rumor? Drop your thoughts below, because the answers might be closer than anyone expects. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep your eyes on the streets. They're talking louder than ever.